I was with one of my daddies, and he asked me an interesting question. He said, Gabriel, in how many houses have you seen art hanging on the wall? I was 16, 17 as at that time, and I honestly had not seen art, like original art hanging on the wall. And I said, no, I've not seen art in any house. Then he followed up by saying, do you want to be poor? Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Not Fine Podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about something we all can relate with, something human, something that has happened to you a lot, something that a lot of us have not learned to embrace. I'm going to be talking about my relationship with failure. Yes, I have a very healthy relationship with failure, but a lot of people have very toxic relationship with failure because they have not understood how to embrace and utilize failure. So before I tell you how I see and conceptualize failure, I'm just going to give you a brief story of my life. If you have watched the first season or the pilot edition of this podcast, you know you have an overarching idea of my story. So the puzzles are going to be placed into those boxes. If you have not watched it, kindly go and watch it so that you can be up to date. So when I was in primary school, when my dad was still alive, he was always there to guide me through assignments, challenge me. So at that point, I used to come like a position I can't remember. So he challenged me and said, if you can come first 10, I'll buy you this thing. And guess what? I worked hard in school and tried my best, and I came 10th position. Guess what? I became comfortable coming 10th. Then at some point, he told me that if you can come first 4, I'll buy you this thing. Do you know what happened? I started coming 4th position. Then he said, if you can come 3rd position, I'll get you this. And I moved to 3rd. That's how I moved to 2nd. And I got stuck there because the lady that was coming first was a tough meat. At some point, my dad said, what do you want? Then I told him what I wanted. At that point, there was this Game Boy cartridge game that I really wanted to own. I told him I wanted that. And he said, if you can come 1st position, I'll get you this. Guys, when I went to school, I was focused because there was a goal ahead. And guess what? I came first. Just by 0.1. I mean, our teacher calculated that thing in front of us, and I passed the person that came second with just 0.1. It was crazy. But then, I'll tell you something sad. My dad was not alive to see that particular result. So we wrote the exams before the crisis. The results came out after the crisis. So I didn't get my Game Boy. And after that time, I just got very uninterested in school. I was just there. There was nobody to challenge me again. So I was just on my own, winging things. There was no more challenges. I was just moving through life. Secondary school, nobody was checking my results. I never came first 10, except once. And it was a mistake. I think school had to even redo the results. But I didn't tell anybody. So if you see it now, that thing was a mistake. Then I got into, remember that time where I had to stay at home for 1 year because I did not have maths? That was when I had to embrace failure. Imagine having D7 3 times in one subject. It was crushing. So I eventually got into school, university. I was given a course that I didn't know anything about, but you know how people will just tell you that, oh, it's a very good course. Geology is a good course. You can get a job in an oil company and all that, and they just made me take the course, even though I wanted to go and study fine arts at the time. In fact, I even wrote fine arts in one of the latest WAEC I did, and I had an A1 because talents day body. I got into school, was studying geology, and I honestly did not like it. After year one, I called home and said, guys, I don't want to do this. I would rather write another jam and start school again. But they said, you already know how to do art so much. You already have the talent. Why not do something else so that you can have two things to do? And I was young at the time. In fact, let me rewind a bit and tell you why I did not study fine arts in school. Because I was going to study fine arts. I was with one of my daddies, and he asked me an interesting question. He said, Gabriel, in how many houses have you seen art hanging on the wall? I was 16, 17 as at that time, and I honestly had not seen art, like original art hanging on the wall. And I said, no, I've not seen art in any house. Then he followed up by saying, do you want to be poor? I was shocked. I didn't know how to answer that question, and I knew that, of course, I didn't want to be poor, but I knew what I wanted to do. So I was crippled, and I just had to do what everybody wanted me to do. So I found myself in university studying geology, called home. Home said, just keep doing it so that you have two things doing. I think that was one of the worst decisions I made. But in hindsight, it wasn't, I was able to turn my pains into purpose. So, and that's the purpose of this podcast, yeah? I did geology. I was failing crazily in school because I did not want to read, because reading was not interesting. The reading was interesting, but when it came to answering questions, because of the kind of mind I have and the kind of course that geology is something that engages your imagination. We're studying the earth, yeah? So when I read stuff, I make sense of it. I'm very creative about what I read. So when you ask me questions about what I've read, I'm only able to give you my understanding of what I have read. Meanwhile, the lecturers were looking for what they gave you. So it wasn't good for me on that level. I had to choose between either retaining the integrity of my creativity or falling into the straight-headed machine that the school wanted to build out of me. But I chose to fail. And it was crazy because I failed a lot. I decided that I was not going to cheat in school, and I didn't feel like reading too. So that was a bad combination. People were wondering, why would you say you are not going to read, you will not cheat? What's wrong with you? But then, that was how I moved through school. I failed a lot. I know I've said this, but I feel like telling people my CGPA. But I won't tell you. So I finished school. I managed to finish school without an extra year, by the way. I have a friend. Oh my God. I'm going to bring him on the podcast soon so you hear his story. I'm not even sure if that guy finished school because I've not seen his certificate. But anyway, I said all this story to talk about failure, to define failure with my lens, to show you how I conceptualize failure. I see failure as missing the mark, but something that is like a step towards the mark. Because if you don't miss the mark, you cannot hit the mark. But we most times we see failure as an end instead of a means. There was one time in school I was depressed, and I just told myself that, Gabriel, if you can go through this process and you don't die, I mean, if you can finish this thing, then nothing can kill you anymore. Nothing can affect you. That was my mindset. I see failure as a mark, something that we are trying to hit, but we fail to hit. And each time we try to hit it and we fail, our brain readjusts and learns something new, learns how not to try, so that when we try again, we are better. That's how I see failure. I see failure as a challenge that we chase so that we can become better. I see failure as very essential in keeping a stable mental health. If failure does not exist, then challenges cannot exist. If challenges does not exist, then we cannot struggle. And many times we look at struggling as something bad. We look at struggling as the end of our lives. But struggling is a point where we're building ourselves towards success. So success in itself is not an end. In fact, now I have embraced increasing my failure rate so that I can increase my success rate. People are afraid of failing because of how the world has conceptualized what failure is. So after school, because I was doing my art in school, at least I had an idea of what I wanted to do. But most of my guys did not have purposes again because they were out of the system. But at that time was when my own journey was starting, because I had created track records of failure through my life, and that now served as an anchor for me. So I'm kind of starting something that I will call the failure story, because I realized that most times we do not hear failure stories, we only hear success stories, and we don't realize that what is behind every success story is a bunch of failure stories. But because the world does not celebrate failure, they say success is everyone's friend, but failure has no mother. Because the world does not celebrate failure, we despise our processes. So I'm going to be interviewing a lot of people to hear their failure stories, so that at least we can learn how they were able to endure through the processes into what we now celebrate as success. And if you know success, you know that whenever you hit success, you automatically need another challenge, which requires a series of failure that will bring you into success, where you now want another challenge. And that's what life is. If you don't have that, you cannot have a stable mind, you cannot have a stable mental health. So I'm coming to implore you to have a healthy relationship with failure like me. If you have not failed at something, you cannot be a master at it. Failure is what gives you the scars, the credibility to succeed. You must first of all look foolish at something before you can become a master at it. I had a conversation with one of my friends. I'll just share that, then I'll end this podcast. I had a conversation with one of my friends that I'll consider him a genius when we were in secondary school back then. And he told me something that struck me. He said, I envy you because you have passion. And I'm like, bro, I envy you because you have never failed. Then he started telling me how that his brain just works in one direction, and he wishes he would have been creative enough to think in different direction, yeah? But from where I stood, I saw that he was asking for failure. Because if your brain is going to be able to work creatively, then you are saying that you want to try and fail. So I think that the cause of everything is in the gift of it. So each of us have our gifts, and all our gifts have their causes. So I'm employing you to embrace your failure, embrace your processes, and understand that it is yours. Own it. That's the only way you can keep a stable mental health. Take care of your mind, guys. See you in another episode of Not Fine Podcast. Remember, it's okay not to be okay. What's not okay is remaining there. Peace.